Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Pints with Jack Skype session. We are still in Tolkien Month, which means that we're still talking to Joseph Pearce. Last time we spoke about his book, Tolkien, Man and Myth, and this time we're talking about Bilbo's journey, discovering the hidden meaning of The Hobbit. As you recall, Joseph Pearce has been on this show before. He's been on the podcast talking about C.S. Lewis's relationship with Catholicism, and he's been on the last few Skype sessions talking about his various Lewis and Tolkien books, which are many. Joseph is the director of book publishing at the Augustine Institute. He's the editor of the St. Austin Review, and he's series editor of the Ignatian Critical Editions. And you can listen to his weekly podcast, Faith and Culture, and you can find out more about him and listen to his other materials at jpearce.co. Joseph, welcome back.
Good to be back.
So, what book are we talking about today?
Well, my book, Frodo's Journey, Discovering the Hidden Meaning of the Hobbit, which was written much
Bilbo,
more recently.
Isn't it? Isn't it Bilbo's Journey?
Yeah, Frodo's Journey is another book I wrote. Yeah, I'm jumping the gun on that one.
Too many books.
Bilbo's Journey, which is the earlier of the two books I wrote, Discovering the Hidden Meaning of the Hobbit. So as we discussed last time, I wrote a literary life of Tolkien when I was living in England back in the late 1990s, called Tolkien, Man and Myth. But my two more recent books, Bilbo's Journey and Frodo's Journey, were published by Tan Books. I'm not sure the dates, but within the last decade, 2012, 2013, 2014, I don't know, fairly recently.
And what do you go through in this book? I mean, clearly something about the Hobbit.
Well, yes, indeed. I basically go through the story chapter by chapter, so the book follows the story. But that Tolkien didn't write crude or formal allegory, thanks be to God. So there's all sorts of meanings in the story that are not necessarily obvious, that are not necessarily going to leap out at us when we read the book for the first time. So what I endeavour to do in The Hobbit is to show that those deeper moral, philosophical, theological, ethical aspects of things that are going on in Bilbo's journey, and it is a journey. And that's the first thing about it, is that that Bilbo is in a sense us. He's an everyman figure because his journey is something which reflects our own journey. And the Christian understanding of who we are is homo viator, man on a journey, or man on a quest, or traveling man, pilgrim man, various ways you can pronounce homo viator. But basically, each of our lives is a quest. The purpose of it is to get to heaven, and we are going to meet dragons on the way. Many of the dragons are actually inside ourselves. So Bilbo starts at the beginning of the book, basically with the dragon sickness, so he's something of a dragon himself, and the journey is necessary so he can overcome that dragon sickness and become the true hobbit he's meant to be, by getting rid of that possessiveness, which is the sickness that dragons and people that act like dragons suffer from.
What do you think Bilbo is possessive of?
Well, at the beginning, basically, he's like all of us. He's really possessed by the creature comforts. So he's surrounding his hobbit hole by all of his possessions, by all the things he needs. And he doesn't want to go anywhere because he's got himself cosseted in this little comfort zone bubble that prevents him from actually taking the adventure which life is, by refusing the suffering that is essential to actually grow spiritually. So he has to, if you like, leave his comfort zone to get out into the danger zone, which is the adventure of life, in order to grow into the fullness of the hobbit he's meant to be.
Yeah, I do like that. I often just say that we're spiritually all hobbits. Once we've reached our comfort zone with God, we want things to stay exactly as it is. We don't want to put out into the deep. We don't want to grow in faith. No, we're quite happy with this little... He said, all we needed was a mustard seed. Well, I think I've got about that. So, please go away and stop challenging me.
Yeah, there's a phrase I use in the book which I think sums it up. It sums not just Bilbo up, but all of us as well. That we are creatures of comfort addicted to the creature comforts. That is the dragon sickness.
But some people in that story, namely Thorin, he gets a different kind of dragon sickness. His is for the more traditional, sins of gluttony and pride, and for the actual dragon's gold.
Well, yeah, but I don't think it's a huge difference, because it's just what I sometimes say, punningly, so pun warning, that the only difference between
people are used to me on this podcast. They don't need warnings for puns. It's like people that say no pun intended. No, I refuse that. Own it. Puns are great.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, pun intended every time. So this is a pun intended. I said the only difference between Bilbo at the beginning of the story and Smaug towards the end is one of scale. In the sense that the Bilbo is surrounded by his own little dragon horde in his hobbit hole, and he lives under hill, surrounded by his treasure. Smaug lives under the mountain, surrounded by a much bigger horde of treasure, but they're both actually addicted to their possessions. They are possessed by their possessions. That's the paradox. They don't possess their possessions possess them. And whereas Smaug, of course, never, probably because he is a dragon, never gets beyond that being possessed by his horde, being possessed by his possessions. The Bilbo is called to do that. Thorin has the same avarice. He wants the same treasure that's possessed the dragon to possess him. And it's only, of course, a spoiler for those that have never read it, it's only on his deathbed that he actually comes to his senses.
Mm. So what is it that happens to Bilbo over the course of this journey, this purgative journey, which allows him to let go of this possessiveness?
Well, essentially, he learns to take up his cross, which means sacrificing himself for others. So he begins selfish and he ends selfless. And so when he returns back home to Hobbiton, we're told that the kettle on the hearth sings much more sweetly, because he's no longer possessed by it. He possesses it. It doesn't possess him. So it's not that there's anything wrong with the creature comforts of home, as long as we have a healthy detachment from them, that we're not actually possessed by them.
I think that's very true in my own experience. The best meals that I have are usually at the end of Lent, when the fasting comes to its conclusion, and I get the option of having a chicken burrito again. It's just the most delicious meal in my life.
Mine was always in the old days when I was more strict with myself. Marriage is putting an end to that. I'm more strict with myself in other ways now. But when I used to give up all booze for the whole of Lent at all times, including Sundays, well, that first beverage on Easter Sunday was almost like a little premonition of heaven.
Well, doesn't St. Bridget, when she has a vision of heaven, she sees it as a lake of beer?
She does, so she's a sensible Irish gal.
Wonderful stuff. So to wrap things up, you said that this book was put out by Tan Books?
Yes, this one's at Tan Books. So tanbooks.com is the way to check it out, and indeed not just check it out, but buy it.
And that way you go to contribute to your post-Lenten beer.
Yes, indeed.
Wonderful. And if you could just wrap things up then by telling people where they can find out more about you.
Yes, so to find out what I'm up to, what I'm writing, the podcast that I'm recording, etc., go to my own personal website, which is jpearce.co, jpearce.co.
And be sure to check out the Faith and Culture podcast. Oh, I can't speak. Okay. Cheers.